A win tomorrow night at the Emirates against Newcastle would wrap up second place in the Premier League for Arsenal, but good results against Newcastle in crunch games have been hard to come by recently. This is the Arsenal vs Newcastle preview podcast. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark. Wherever you are, I hope you are well. It is very, very close to the end of the season now. We have 2 games remaining. Unfortunately, we still have a job to do in 2 games remaining. The results last night really did not go our way. We needed Tottenham and Manchester United to produce some results and make things a little bit easier and less stressful for us. Unfortunately, they did not do that. Chelsea won, Villa won. So, we've still got plenty of work to do, and it starts tomorrow afternoon at the Emirates Stadium against Newcastle. Before we get into the game, just want to welcome all of you from all around the world. The country list is really expanding. There are more and more countries being added all the time. I guess just a quick couple new ones that I've noticed. Czech Republic, welcome to you if you are listening from there, and also France. We obviously, Arsenal has a huge connection in France and a huge French influence in its past with Arsene Wenger, Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira. So if you are from France, welcome. We've had a steady stream of French listeners for a little while, so welcome if you are one of our French listeners. Okay, let's get into it. Is it time for revenge on Newcastle? We've had a horrible time in recent memory, not just this season. This season we lost 2-0 in both legs of the Carabao Cup semi-final. It was very painful. It was painful in the sense that I think for the majority of the games this year, you can look at Arsenal and say, you've really given a decent account of yourself. You just haven't had X, Y, Z. You haven't had the killer touch. You haven't had the run of the green. In both of those games, I don't think you can say that. I think we were poor. Same with the 1-0 defeat in the league. It was one of the first times in the season where I was like, okay, there's no context there. I'm genuinely just annoyed by that performance. I think it was poor. We tend to not show up against them. We've not scored against them this year. And obviously there was a couple of seasons ago where we went to St James's Park and they ended our push for Champions League football, essentially. So, look, I used to love Newcastle. Weird thing to say. Used to love them. I think back to the times when it was like Nobby Solano and Laurent Blanc, and even more modern, Hatem Ben Arthur, Demba Ba, Papi Cisse. They've had some players that you just can't help but love. Nobby Solano really was one that, I don't think any opposition fans disliked. They are very dislikable right now, though, aren't they? Credit to them. I think they've had a wonderful season. Obviously won their first trophy in God knows how many years. And Eddie Howe has done an incredible job of setting them up. And I think they do genuinely have a very strong shout for the best midfield 3 in the league. I think it's one of the few midfield 3s that I'd look at and go, ooh, okay, I'm not sure we have the upper hand in the centre of that pitch. That is Guimaraes, Joelinton and Tonali in electric form. Joelinton suspended. We'll come on to team news. But we've not won in 5 games. They're in pretty good form. I think they have won 8 of their last 10 in all comps. So that is quite incredible. Of course, this game does have ramifications, as I said in the intro. I think a point basically guarantees us Champions League based on the remaining fixtures that are left. But a win would wrap up second, and I think that we have to obviously be going out to do that. Mikel Arteta was asked about, is finishing second important in his pre-match press conference, and he spoke about you always have to be as good as you possibly can. He said the dream of winning the Premier League is gone, but as we said, be the best of the rest and feel the pain to be better. So, I really like that from Mikel. I said this the other week. He's taken some flack for his press conferences recently, but actually I think his messaging has always been super, super clear. and he carried it on with that question yesterday, very early to do his press conference, by the way. Obviously, Newcastle are directly behind us. We could drop to third if we lose. There is a mathematical scenario where you could drop to fourth, but actually it's very, very unlikely. City would have to score a ton of goals. We'd have to concede a ton of goals. So, yeah, I think it's unlikely. But is it time for revenge? I think it has to be, right? Let's start ending some of their, aspirations. Because God knows they've ended plenty of ours over recent years. And, we are at the Emirates. Look, we don't have all of our players. That's not a new scenario for us this season. But I think we need to end their aspirations of finishing second, get ourselves stamped in second place, and we can go away to Southampton on the final day and just go from there and enjoy that day. I think it is the most important thing. Of course, like I say, this is the last game at the Emirates this season. Wasn't able to get tickets, unfortunately. But if you are there, do enjoy that. I hear that it is a wonderful day, and the club do plenty of stuff for the fans on days like that. So fingers crossed it is a win to join that good atmosphere. Bit of team news. Obviously, Mourinho suspended. Second yellow card in the game against Liverpool. A silly one, but I understand how it happened, so we will be without him. We did see issues for Rice and Trossard, but both of them did train, and obviously Havertz trained. Mikel Arteta was asked about a number of players and their potential involvement in this game, and he spoke about actually they've not done a complete session, and that includes Rice, Trossard, and Timber. So they're going to wait and see until tomorrow when he said it, but today, so I presume they'll have a training session today, see if they can deal with things that they haven't done already, because they weren't ready to do that at the end of the week. So, watching brief on Rice, Trossard and Timber, I tend to think Rice and Trossard will probably be okay. As Trossard went off holding the back of his leg, and I instantly thought, oh God, here we go, that's a hamstring. It's gone again. This is a big issue. But if he's trained, I just can't see how it can be a hamstring strain or tear. Like, they would not let him train if that was the case. I think they are protecting players. Obviously, they sat Rice down for the Liverpool game. He's probably been carrying something for a while. So they didn't take any risks with Rice. I don't see why they would take any risks with Trossard either. So, look, I think we will probably see them. I doubt we'll see Timber. He has obviously played so many minutes this year. It's crazy. Clearly would not have been the plan. They would have wanted to spread that between White and Timber a little bit more, and I think it's probably the same at left back, right? They would have wanted to spread the minutes between Miles Lewis-Skelly and Calafiori a bit more. It hasn't played out that way. For Newcastle, they're not without injury issues, let's say that. Joe Linton is obviously out, we've seen that in the reports, but Trippier, Hall, Botman and Willock have also been out for a fairly long period of time and won't be available for this game. So very, very interesting that they are playing with some problems. They have the second most goals in the league this year with 68. We are third or fourth. We're on 66, but they're ninth of possession, less than United and Spurs. So, we know how they're going to play. They are going to transition on us quickly. They are going to try and hit the front three very, very early. And I think it's going to be a challenging game. When teams do this to us and they turn games into a bit of a sprinting battle, I don't think we do incredibly well. If a team tends to kind of try and fight us a little bit more, I think there is more of an opportunity for Arsenal to have a good run and win that battle and get on top. But Newcastle are very good at turning games into sprinting games, hitting their very fast and very effective and physical front three very early. So I think we need to be cautious of that, because you don't score the second most goals in the league but be ninth for possession without being direct and physical and impactful when you're moving forward. He's actually the obvious threat, but Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy have been in incredible form in 2025. Anthony Gordon has come back from injury and barely got a look in, and as I said, they've won 8 of their last 10 games in all competitions, so really, really good from them. I'm going to take a short break. When I come back, I'm going to talk about how we can beat them, what do we need to do tactically, and I'm going to do some predictions. Sorry for interrupting everyone, but I am on a mission and I need your help. I'm trying to get Arsenal Unfiltered into the ears of as many people as possible. And the best way that you can help me do that is by going and leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts at. That really, really helps me grow the podcast and allows more people to hear the Arsenal Unfiltered coverage 3 times a week. So if you would be so kind to go and leave a review wherever you get your podcast from, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the Arsenal versus Newcastle match preview podcast here at Arsenal Unfiltered. I'm going to quickly talk now about how do you beat Newcastle, and I think there's a very, very simple to talk about, but very difficult to do tactical adjustment that we have to make. And quite simply, that is that we have to take their midfield out of the game. And that is on the ball and off the ball. There's 2 ways of doing that. We can either, on the ball, we can either go over them, but I think that's going to be more of a challenge without Mikel Merino, or we have to go around them very, very quickly when we win the ball back. So in the scenario where, Newcastle have just had the ball and we've won that ball, and there'll be a compressed space where there are multiple players and whoever's won the ball back. Let's say it's Miles Lewis-Skelly. Let's picture this from the left back position. The number 1 rule in football is when you win the ball back, make 2 passes, get out of that space, and once you've made those 2 passes, you can give yourself a moment to breathe. I think that second pass, or maybe the third pass, has to be not quite a switch, but a very, very direct, aggressive ball that goes around the Newcastle midfield. So we'll win the ball in the left-back spot. You maybe get 2 passes and it ends up with Thomas Partey. That ball, Thomas Partey cannot, at this point, just flick it off to William Saliba, give it to Ben White at right-back and just lazily kind of work it around, because that will allow the Newcastle midfield to reset. He has to be firing it out to Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side, and in reverse, we win it off Harvey Barnes on the left wing. We make 2 passes, Ben White to Saliba into Ødegaard, let's say. Ødegaard needs to then be spinning and finding Gabriel Martinelli, finding Miles Lewis-Skelly, really pushing that ball out wide and high past the Newcastle midfield very, very early. That is how I believe we will be able to do this, and playing those more direct diagonal balls across the pitch. So when the whole side of the pitch is tilted to one way, we need to be winning the ball, getting out there very quickly, and finding the other side of the pitch, because Newcastle are super organised. They're a super organised team, but all the organisation in the world will not be a very, very fast switch of the ball, and we saw this in the second leg against PSG. PSG had a fantastic plan, a fantastic press. Sorry, it might have been the first leg. And we worked that out, and we quickly worked out, actually, we could get Saka isolated against Mendes if we just did a big switch or a diagonal to him early. And I think, you need to do the same against Newcastle. Take that midfield out of it, because it's so good, just like PSG's was, and just play around them, because they will inevitably be ever so slightly drawn to the side of the pitch the game is on, so they will be shuffling across. We need to make sure that once they are shuffled across, we exploit the space over on the other side. Billy Carpenter has spoken about this principle a number of times on Blue Sky, so check him out. He does some wonderful analysis of football in general, but mainly Arsenal. And he's spoken about the kind of overload to isolate. So you overload one side, whether that's in possession or you win the ball back, and the whole kind of game is focused on the right or left side of the pitch. You get yourself out of there and then you switch it. That then allows Martinelli or Saka to be isolated against their fullbacks. And of course, we know that's when we are strongest. So let's do a bit of that. I think that's really important that we work that. Off the ball, we have to stop that transition ball. So it would be very easy for us to look at the attacking strengths of Newcastle and think, okay, whenever we lose the ball, we've got to drop in. But what Newcastle will do is they will go early and fast. They will go direct. They don't mind doing that, and they'll happily put one in behind Miles Lewis-Skelly or put one at the feet of Alexander Isak from 40 yards away. We've seen that in the previous games against them this year, just driving the ball straight into Alexander Isak, and it's very difficult to stop that. Again, it's a very similar principle to what we spoke about before. It takes the midfield out of it by going over them quite a lot. It's not necessarily the switch. It comes from a deeper area when Newcastle do it, and they just put a direct long ball forward. That's why they're only ninth in possession. But, looking at a second or third place finish in the Premier League, because they do these long direct balls so well. So how do Arsenal stop that? Well, you can't drop off. It's a really difficult thing to do, but you have to be willing to, when you lose the ball, spring and go for that, whoever's on the ball, even if it's just to delay. The first principle of defensive play has to be to delay. We often talk about that in one-on-one scenarios when you're running back. If you're running back, the best thing you can do in a one-on-one is delay until your team can get around you and back you up and support you, and then you might be able to commit a little bit more to a challenge. It's the same thing when you're playing a team who will go long and go long early. You have to delay that pass to allow Thomas Partey to get back in front of the centre-backs, to allow kind of marking and defensive overloads in our sense to re-establish themselves. So it's really, really important that if we lose the ball in the Newcastle third or even the Newcastle half, that we are really on them. We're pressing quickly, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, like it obviously needs to be an organised press. A disorganised press doesn't work, but this doesn't need to be a complicated trigger or anything like that. It just has to be losing the ball, and then we go. We spring, we stop that pass, we stop that early ball, we make them play 2 or 3 passes, and then we can settle off at that point, because we know that our midfield, will be organised behind the front three. So, look, we've got a lot of jobs to do to stop them. I think that's really important. And again, what I would like to see, I don't think this is Newcastle specific, to be honest, but I think it worked really well against Liverpool, so I'd like to see it again, is the Martinelli, Trossard rotation and Saka coming in more inside to become like a forward for us. I think that's a really interesting tactical development. I'd like to see that more. I don't think that's specific to Newcastle. I just think that is something that Arsenal could do better and get more people in central zones. So I'd love to see that. Let's do a predicted lineup then. So obviously David Raya in goal. I don't think Jurrien Timber is going to be fit. I'd be amazed if Jurrien Timber plays again this season. He didn't train in the open training session. I think they are basically saying, you've done your job. Let Ben do this bit now. So it'd be Ben White, William Saliba, Jakub Kiwior, and I think they'll go Miles Lewis-Skelly, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Ricardo Calafiori from like 60, maybe even 55 minutes. I think they'll want to use him, and Umdenard, would I play Calafiori? I just thought Miles Lewis-Skelly's a bit fresher. Let's keep that as it is. Partey, Rice, Ødegaard in midfield. I do think Rice will be fit now, assuming he's trained. I think if he hadn't trained, I would be saying something different. And then Saka, Trossard, Martinelli, because Marino's out, we can't play him up front, so I think that front three picks itself. Hopefully we see Ethan a little bit more in this game. In terms of score predictions, I am predicting another draw, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but we are really ending this season with a bit of a whimper. It would be lovely to get a win, but Newcastle are a really effective team, a really positive and clever team. So I think it will be difficult for us, but I think maybe just home advantage might come true in this one, and we'll get a draw. I don't know about you guys. I'm half looking forward to the end of this season and half not. I don't like being without Arsenal. I don't like the summers. I like watching the games, and I miss Arsenal very, very quickly. I usually miss them when they don't have a midweek game, so summers are difficult. But obviously it has been a long, long slog. I haven't listened to it yet, but the title of this week's Arsenal Vision podcast is basically something along the lines of one performance needed or one last push. I'm just going to quickly pull up my Spotify and have a look, because although I haven't listened to it, I think it does reflect what we need. Yeah, one more performance needed. So I'm looking forward to listening to that later, because that is where we're at. Whether it's against Southampton or Newcastle, we just need to get something over the line now, get the job done. Look, if we play like we played in the second half against Liverpool for even 75 minutes against Newcastle, I think we win this game. It's just, do we have the emotional, physical energy to do that? Were we spurred on in that scenario by, the really difficult context that we were in, going 2-0 down, and that emotional energy that we were able to get and galvanise for the comeback? That might be the case. I think it would be difficult to play like that, just with where we're at right now in the season, for 90 minutes. So look, fingers crossed we can do it. I really hope we will do it. Just a quick note, I'm going to be doing some pre-recording because I am away at the end of this season. So I am getting married, I'm going on my honeymoon, so I'm doing some pre-recording. So you will start to, in the coming weeks, hear some episodes that are pre-recorded. Apologies for that. You will hear a little note at the start to tell you when it's a pre-recorded episode, but just a little note for regular listeners to understand that there will be some episodes that maybe aren't capturing exactly the pace of the Arsenal news, but hopefully we'll do a good job of capturing as much as we can and talking about this season and looking ahead to next season. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening. As I said in the middle, please go and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. It really, really helps Arsenal Unfiltered grow, and I'm on a mission to get this podcast into as many Arsenal fans' ears as possible. So really, really helps, and it would be wonderful to have your support in that. All that's left to say now, guys, is thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you very, very soon.